The wind moves slowly across the dark hills, carrying with it a quiet, steady cold that settles deep into the earth. Snow lies thick over the land, soft and undisturbed, stretching far beyond what the eye can see. The sky is pale, almost without color, and the sun lingers low, barely rising before it begins to fade again. In this stillness, the world feels smaller, quieter, and somehow more distant. Inside a long wooden hall, the air is warmer, though not entirely comfortable. A fire burns at the center, its light flickering gently against the carved beams and rough walls. Smoke curls upward, finding its way through a small opening in the roof, though some of it lingers, giving the space a faint, constant haze. The smell of wood, wool, and cooked food fills the room, blending into something familiar and steady. A man sits near the fire, wrapped in layers of thick wool and fur. His name is Eric, though names are not spoken often here, not in full. Around him, others move slowly, quietly, each person focused on simple tasks. A woman mends a torn cloak with careful hands. A child watches the flames, eyes heavy with sleep. Somewhere near the wall, a pot simmers, sending out soft, comforting warmth. Outside, the long winter night has already begun, though it feels as if it never truly ended. Welcome to Mindleapic. If you find comfort in these quiet moments from the past, you might gently tap the like button, or consider subscribing to join more peaceful journeys like this. You can also leave a soft comment, perhaps sharing where you are listening from tonight, whether it is a quiet town, a busy city, or somewhere far away under a different sky. Now, let us return to Eric, and to the long winter that shapes every part of his life. The days during this season are short, and they pass almost unnoticed. Eric wakes before the faint light appears, though he is never sure exactly when that is. Time here is not measured by clocks or bells, but by habits, by the slow rhythm of the body, and by the needs of the household. He rises from his sleeping place along the wall, where furs and blankets are laid over simple wooden boards. The warmth from the fire does not always reach this far, and the cold often clings to him even as he wakes. He pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders, pausing for a moment before stepping closer to the fire. There is no rush. There is never much to hurry toward during the winter months. Food is prepared slowly. Bread, if there is any left, is hard and must be softened with warm broth. Dried fish and preserved meat are shared carefully, measured out so that it will last through the long stretch of cold days. Eric eats without speaking much, his thoughts moving as slowly as the morning itself. Outside, the land is quiet, but it is not empty. Beneath the snow, the earth rests. The fields that once grew barley and oats now sleep, waiting for the distant return of warmth. The sea, not far from the settlement, shifts and groans under sheets of ice, though sometimes, when the weather allows, small boats still venture out in search of fish. But most days there is little reason to leave the shelter of the hall. Winter is not a time of travel or adventure. It is a time of waiting. Eric moves to the far side of the hall, where tools are kept. He picks up a piece of wood and a small knife, sitting down once more near the fire. His hands begin to work almost without thought, shaping the wood slowly, steadily. Each movement is calm, practiced, and quiet. These small tasks fill the hours, repairing, carving, mending, preparing. They are not exciting, but they are necessary. And in the long winter nights, necessity becomes a kind of comfort. The fire crackles softly, sending out gentle bursts of warmth. Shadows move along the walls, stretching and shifting as the flames change. Voices rise now and then, low and calm, but often the hall is filled with silence, broken only by the sounds of work and the steady breathing of those who rest. Sleep comes often during this season, though it is not always deep or complete. Without strong daylight to guide them, people drift in and out of rest, waking and sleeping at irregular times. The night feels endless, and so the body adapts, taking rest whenever it can. Eric feels this deeply. Sometimes he wakes and is unsure how long he has slept, or whether it is day or night outside. The world beyond the hall has become distant, almost unreal, as if it belongs to another time. Still, there are moments when the quiet feels heavier than usual. On certain nights, the wind grows stronger, pressing against the walls of the hall with a low, steady force. Snow gathers along the edges of the roof, and the air inside becomes colder despite the fire. In these moments, everyone draws a little closer together, not out of fear, but out of habit, out of a shared understanding that winter is something to endure, not to challenge. Eric pauses in his work, listening to the sound of the wind. It is not threatening, but it reminds him of how small their world is during these months. The vast lands beyond their settlement are hidden now, covered in snow and shadow, waiting quietly for the seasons to change. He sets the carved piece of wood aside, flexing his fingers slowly. The warmth of the fire has kept them from stiffening too much, but the cold always lingers just beneath the surface. Across the hall, someone begins to speak, telling a story in a soft, steady voice. It is not loud, and it does not demand attention, but gradually others begin to listen. Stories are a gentle way to pass the time, to fill the long hours with something more than silence. Eric listens too, though his eyes grow heavy as the voice continues. The words blend with the crackling of the fire, with the quiet movements of those around him, with the steady rhythm of the winter night. Outside, the darkness deepens, though it never truly changes. The snow reflects what little light remains, giving the world a faint, endless glow. Inside, the fire continues to burn, steady and patient, as Eric leans back against the wooden wall, letting his eyes close just for a moment, as the long winter night carries on without hurry. The fire has burned lower now, though it never truly goes out. Someone always tends to it, even in the deepest hours of the night, feeding it with small pieces of wood to keep the warmth alive. In this season, the fire is more than comfort. It is something closer to survival, a quiet center around which everything else depends. Eric wakes again, though he cannot say how much time has passed. The hall is dim, lit only by the soft glow of embers and a few low flames. The voices that once filled the space have faded into silence. Around him, most of the others are resting, wrapped in furs, their breathing slow and steady. For a moment he stays still, listening. There is a certain kind of quiet that belongs only to winter nights like this. It is not empty, but full in a different way. The wind outside has softened, and the hall itself seems to hold its breath, as if even the wood and stone have settled into rest. Eric shifts slightly, pulling his cloak closer. The air has grown cooler while he slept. He sits up slowly, careful not to disturb those nearby, and moves toward the fire. A small pile of wood rests beside it, prepared earlier. He takes a piece and places it gently onto the glowing coals. The flames respond slowly, stretching upward, growing a little stronger, casting a warm, golden light across the floor. He watches for a while, his thoughts moving in no particular direction. Winter brings with it long stretches of time like this, where nothing is demanded and nothing is urgent. The days of summer, filled with work in the fields, with travel, with the steady rhythm of life outside, feel far away now. In their place is something slower, quieter, and in some ways heavier. It is not boredom exactly. It is something closer to stillness. After a while, Eric stands and moves carefully toward the entrance of the hall. A thick wooden door, reinforced with iron, keeps most of the cold at bay. He does not open it fully, only enough to let a thin line of outside air slip in. The cold is immediate and sharp, a clean contrast to the warmth behind him. He steps just outside, pulling the door closed again with a soft, controlled motion. The world beyond is pale and silent. Snow covers everything, smoothing out the land into gentle shapes and soft lines. The sky above is dark, though not completely black. There is a faint glow, as if the horizon still remembers the sun, even though it has long since disappeared. Eric stands still, letting his eyes adjust. In the distance, the outlines of other buildings can be seen. Low and sturdy, their roofs heavy with snow. No movement comes from them now. Everyone is inside, waiting out the same long night. He takes a slow breath. The air is cold enough to sting slightly, filling his lungs with a sharp clarity that is almost refreshing. Moments like this are rare, but they are not unwelcome. Inside the hall, the world is shared, warm and close. Outside, it is wide, quiet, and endless. He does not stay long. The cold, while clean and clear, is not something to linger in without purpose. After a few moments, he turns and steps back inside, closing the door firmly behind him. The warmth returns slowly, wrapping around him as he moves back toward the fire. One of the others has stirred while he was outside. An older man, wrapped in a heavy fur cloak, sits up and looks toward the fire with tired eyes. There is no greeting, no need for words. A simple glance is enough. Eric nods slightly, then sits once more. The older man shifts closer to the fire, extending his hands toward the warmth. His movements are slower, more deliberate, shaped by years of winters like this. After a moment, he reaches for a small wooden cup beside him, taking a quiet drink. There is comfort in these small, repeated actions. The hall slowly begins to wake again, though not all at once. A child stirs, turning over in their blankets. Someone near the far wall rises to check the pot that hangs over the fire, lifting the lid just enough to release a soft cloud of steam. Time moves gently here, without clear edges. Eric picks up his carving once more, turning the piece of wood in his hands. The shape is beginning to form, though it is not anything important. Perhaps a handle or a small tool. It does not need to be perfect. His knife moves slowly, shaving thin curls from the surface. Each motion is careful, steady, guided more by feeling than by sight. Across the hall, the older man begins to speak again, his voice low and even. This time, it is not a story, but something quieter. He speaks of small things, of weather from past winters, of a season when the snow came early and stayed longer than expected, of the way the sea looked under ice, and how the light reflected across it. These are not grand stories, but they are familiar ones. Eric listens without looking up, letting the words settle around him. There is a rhythm to them, much like the rhythm of the fire, or the steady motion of his hands. Winter nights are long, but they are not empty. They are filled with these small moments, these quiet exchanges, these simple tasks that pass the time without hurry. Outside, the darkness continues, unchanged. Inside, the hall holds its warmth, its light, and its steady, quiet life as Eric continues to carve, the soft sound of wood and knife blending, gently with the low voice of the old man and the ever-present crackle of the fire. The slow rhythm of the hall continues, almost unnoticed, like the quiet flow of a river beneath ice. Time no longer feels divided into clear pieces. There is no true morning, no full day, no deep night. Instead, everything blends together into a gentle, endless stretch of dim light and soft darkness. Eric's hands grow slightly tired, and he sets the carving aside once more. The small piece of wood rests near the fire, its shape simple but smooth, marked by careful attention. He does not look at it for long. It is enough that it exists, that the time has passed in a steady way. The pot over the fire begins to release a stronger scent now. Someone has added more water, perhaps a handful of dried herbs, or small pieces of meat saved from earlier days. The smell is not rich, but it is warm and comforting, filling the space with a quiet promise of something to eat. A woman near the fire stirs the pot slowly, her movements calm and unhurried. She does not rush the process. Nothing in winter is rushed. Eric shifts closer, extending his hands toward the growing warmth. The fire has strengthened again, its light spreading gently across the hall, touching the wooden beams above and the furs along the walls. Shadows move softly, stretching and folding as the flames change shape. He notices the child from earlier now sitting upright, still wrapped in blankets. The child watches the pot with quiet focus, as if the slow movement of steam is something important, something worth observing. There is a stillness in the child's gaze, shaped by these long nights, where even small things become part of the world in a deeper way. Eric allows a faint, almost unnoticeable smile to pass across his face. Hunger during winter is never sharp, never overwhelming. It is more like a steady presence, always there, always reminding. Food is taken in small amounts, enough to continue, enough to keep the body warm and strong. When the food is ready, it is shared without ceremony. Wooden bowls are passed quietly, hands moving from one to another in a familiar pattern. Eric receives his portion, holding the bowl close, letting the warmth settle into his fingers before taking a slow bite. The taste is simple: broth, softened pieces of dried fish, perhaps a trace of grain. It is not meant to be exciting. It is meant to last. He eats slowly, listening again to the low sounds around him. The older man's voice has softened, fading into silence. Others now speak in quiet tones, exchanging small thoughts, gentle observations. No one raises their voice. There is no need. Outside, the wind begins to rise again, brushing lightly against the walls. It is not strong, but it carries a distant sound, something like a long, low breath moving across the land. Eric glances toward the door, though he does not move. The outside world feels far away again, separated by layers of wood, warmth, and shared presence. After finishing his meal, he sets the bowl aside, wiping it clean with a small piece of cloth. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest remains are valued, saved, or reused. A few others begin to prepare for rest once more. They do not wait for a specific time. When the body feels tired, it rests. When it wakes, it rises again. This pattern continues without clear boundaries, shaped only by need. Eric leans back slightly, resting against the wooden wall. The warmth from the fire reaches him more fully now, easing the quiet stiffness in his shoulders. His eyes drift across the hall, taking in the familiar shapes and movements. The carved beams above him hold faint patterns, worn by time but still visible. The walls, lined with tools and simple belongings, tell quiet stories of past seasons, of work done during brighter days. There is a deep sense of continuity here. Each winter is similar to the last, and yet each one carries its own small differences, its own quiet changes. A woman begins to hum softly, almost without realizing it. The sound is low, steady, and simple. It blends with the crackle of the fire, with the soft movements of those settling down again. Eric closes his eyes for a moment, not fully sleeping, but resting within the sound. In the distance, beyond the hall, the land continues to sleep under its heavy blanket of snow. Trees stand still, their branches bare and silent. The sea, held partly in ice, shifts slowly beneath its frozen surface. This is a season of waiting, but it is also a season of endurance. Inside the hall, warmth is maintained not only by the fire, but by the presence of others. Each person contributes in small ways, tending the fire, preparing food, repairing tools, sharing stories, even simply being there. Eric opens his eyes again, watching as one of the younger men carefully checks the stack of firewood, counting what remains. There is no panic in his movements, only quiet awareness. Supplies must last. Everything must be measured against the long stretch of days still ahead. The younger man adds a few more pieces to the fire, adjusting them with practiced care. The flames respond slowly, growing just enough to keep the warmth steady. Eric shifts slightly, feeling the gentle pull of sleep returning. It is not sudden. It arrives slowly, like the fading of light at the edge of the sky. He lowers himself onto the furs once more, pulling them close around him. The sounds of the hall continue, but they grow softer, more distant, as his body begins to rest again. The humming fades, the voices quiet, the fire remains, and within the steady warmth of the hall, surrounded by the slow, unchanging rhythm of winter, Eric drifts once more into sleep as the long night carries on without end. The warmth of sleep is gentle, but it does not last forever. Eric wakes again, slowly, as if rising through layers of quiet. His eyes open to the same dim glow, the same soft movement of firelight along the beams above him. For a moment, nothing has changed, and yet time has passed in its quiet, unseen way. The air feels slightly cooler now, though not cold enough to trouble him. The fire has settled into a steady bed of coals, with only a few small flames reaching upward. Someone nearby shifts, pulling their furs closer, adjusting to the subtle change. Eric remains still for a while, listening. There is a faint sound coming from outside, something softer than wind. It is almost like a distant whisper, or the gentle brushing of snow against itself. He does not think much of it. Winter carries many quiet sounds, and most of them pass without meaning. He sits up slowly, rubbing his hands together to bring warmth back into his fingers. The stiffness is familiar, a quiet reminder of the cold that lingers even within the shelter of the hall. Across the room, a young woman is already awake, sitting near the fire. She feeds it carefully, adding thin pieces of wood rather than large ones, letting the flames grow slowly and evenly. Her movements are calm, almost meditative, shaped by long practice. Eric watches her for a moment, then rises and moves closer to the fire. There is no need to speak. The silence between them is not empty. It is shared, understood. The flames begin to strengthen again, their light spreading outward, touching the faces of those still resting. A few more people begin to stir, drawn gently back into wakefulness by the warmth and the shifting rhythm of the hall. The pot has been moved slightly to the side, its contents resting for now. There will be more food later, but not yet. For now, the hall returns slowly to life in small, quiet ways. Eric sits and reaches for another piece of wood, turning it in his hands. This one is rougher, less shaped. He picks up his knife again, not out of need, but because the motion brings a kind of steady calm. Each cut is slow, careful, unhurried. Near the entrance, the door creaks slightly, not opening, but shifting under the weight of snow that has gathered outside. The faint sound reminds everyone of the world beyond the walls, even if they do not look toward it. One of the older women stands and walks toward the door. She places her hand against it, feeling the cold that presses from the other side. Then, with slow effort, she pushes it open just a little. A soft drift of snow slips inward, light and dry. The outside air follows, cool and sharp, carrying with it the quiet scent of frozen earth and distant trees. She does not open the door wide, just enough to clear the edge, to ease the pressure, to let the hall breathe for a moment. Then she closes it again, sealing the warmth back inside. Eirik watches this simple act with quiet attention. These small tasks matter. Each one is part of keeping the balance between inside and outside, between warmth and cold, between what is held and what is kept away. The hall grows brighter as the fire strengthens. The light does not reach far, but it is enough. Faces become clearer, movements more defined. Someone begins to stretch, arms reaching upward, shaking off the heaviness of sleep. Another person moves toward the tools, checking them one by one, even though there is little work to be done outside. Winter is not only about rest, it is also about preparation. Eirik's carving takes shape again beneath his hands. The edges become smoother, the lines more certain. He does not rush to finish it. There is no need to complete anything quickly during these long nights. Time is not something to chase here. A quiet conversation begins near the far wall. Two voices, low and steady, speaking of small concerns. How much food remains. How the weather has shifted over the past days. Whether the snow feels heavier this season. These are not urgent worries, but they are always present, like a gentle weight carried through each day. Eirik listens without turning his head. The words blend into the steady atmosphere, becoming part of the rhythm rather than something separate. The young woman who tended the fire now moves to the pot again, lifting the lid slightly to check its contents. She adds a little water, stirring slowly, keeping everything from settling too heavily at the bottom. Steam rises again, soft and quiet. Eirik's eyes follow the movement of the steam as it drifts upward, fading into the air above. It moves slowly, without hurry, much like everything else in this place. Outside, the faint sound returns again, that soft shifting of snow. Perhaps it is the wind returning, or the quiet settling of the land under its frozen cover. He considers for a moment stepping outside again, but he does not. The warmth of the hall, the quiet presence of others, the steady fire, all hold him here. There is no reason to leave, no task waiting beyond the door. Winter teaches patience in this way. Not everything needs to be done. Not every moment needs to be filled. Eirik sets his carving down once more, letting his hands rest. He leans slightly forward, watching the flames as they move and change. Their shapes never quite the same from one moment to the next. There is something calming in that quiet movement, something that asks for nothing and offers just enough. Around him, the hall continues its slow rhythm. People wake, move, rest, speak softly, and fall quiet again. The cycle repeats, not in strict order, but in a gentle, flowing pattern that shapes the long winter night. Eirik breathes slowly, feeling the warmth settle into him once more, as the fire continues to burn steadily and the quiet life inside the hall carries on without interruption. The steady glow of the fire holds the center of the hall, as it always does. But now there is a subtle shift in the air. It is not something easily seen or heard, but it is felt. A quiet awareness passes through the room, as if each person senses the slow movement of time beneath the stillness. Eirik remains seated, though his posture changes slightly. He stretches his legs forward, feeling the stiffness ease little by little. The warmth from the fire reaches him more fully now, softening the edges of the cold that clings to his body. Across the hall, someone begins to gather small bundles of wool. The fibers are thick and slightly rough, but they are strong, and they hold warmth well. The woman who gathers them works with quiet focus, twisting and preparing the wool for spinning. Eric watches for a moment, then looks down at his hands. Winter is a season of making. Not large things, not grand things, but small, useful ones. Items that will be needed when the cold lifts and the land begins to wake again. Every piece prepared now will have its place later. He reaches for another piece of wood, this one slightly curved, and begins again. The knife moves slowly, following the natural line of the grain. There is no need to force the shape. The wood offers its own quiet guidance. The sound of spinning begins soon after, a soft, steady rhythm, almost like a quiet heartbeat within the hall. The fibers twist together, becoming stronger, more defined. The woman's hands move with ease, shaped by years of practice, each motion flowing into the next without pause. The sound blends with the fire, with the low voices, with the gentle shifting of bodies at rest. Eric breathes in slowly, letting the rhythm settle around him. There is something deeply calming in these repeated actions. They do not demand attention, but they hold it gently, guiding the mind into a quieter place. Near the wall, a younger boy sits with a small tool, attempting to shape a piece of bone. His movements are less certain, his grip not yet steady. Every so often, he pauses, looking at the object with quiet concentration, as if trying to understand it more deeply. An older man watches him from nearby, offering no direct instruction, only presence. In time, the boy adjusts his grip, changes his angle, and continues. This is how learning happens here. Not through loud teaching, but through quiet observation, through patience, through time. Eric glances toward them, then returns to his own work. The piece in his hand is beginning to take a clearer form now. A handle, perhaps, or part of a tool that will be used in the coming seasons. It does not need decoration. It only needs to be strong, smooth, and reliable. He runs his fingers along the surface, feeling for rough edges, then carefully smooths them away. The fire shifts again, one of the logs settling deeper into the coals. A small burst of sparks rises and fades, disappearing into the dim space above. No one reacts. It is a familiar sound, a normal part of the fire's quiet life. The pot is stirred once more, though no one eats yet. Food is taken when needed, not simply when it is ready. There is a quiet understanding of this, a shared sense of balance. Eric leans back slightly, resting his shoulders against the wall again. His eyes move toward the roof, where the smoke gathers and slowly escapes through the opening above. The movement is slow, almost drifting, as if the smoke itself is in no hurry to leave. He watches it for a long moment. Outside, the snow continues to settle. There is no strong wind now, only a gentle fall, each flake finding its place upon the ground, adding to the quiet weight that covers the land. The world beyond the hall grows softer, more still with each passing moment. Inside, the warmth holds steady. The spinning continues. The carving continues. The quiet voices rise and fall, never breaking the calm. Eric closes his eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to rest within the sound. In the distance, one of the doors within the hall opens slightly, revealing a smaller storage space. Someone steps inside, checking supplies. The movement is careful, deliberate. Every item is counted, every piece noted. Winter allows no carelessness. After a short time, the door closes again, and the quiet returns fully. Eric opens his eyes once more. He lifts the carved piece, turning it slowly in the firelight. The surface is smooth now, the shape complete. It is a small thing, but it carries the time he has spent, the quiet effort, the steady patience of these long hours. He sets it aside with the others, where it will wait until it is needed. There is no sense of completion, no moment of pride or finality, just the simple knowledge that the work is done. The hall breathes quietly around him, filled with warmth, with presence, with the slow passage of time that defines these long winter nights. Eric shifts slightly, drawing his cloak closer once again, as the fire continues its steady glow and the soft rhythm of winter life carries on without change. The quiet rhythm of the hall continues to settle into itself, like a calm tide that rises and falls without urgency. Nothing calls for attention, yet everything remains gently alive. The fire glows steadily, its warmth reaching outward in soft waves, touching each person in small, comforting ways. Eirik shifts slightly, noticing how the air feels different again. Not colder, not warmer, but changed in a way that is hard to name. Perhaps it is simply the passage of time, or the way the body adjusts to the long stretch of winter. He leans forward and reaches toward the fire, adjusting one of the logs. The wood is dry and burns slowly, giving off a steady heat rather than a quick, bright flame. This is the kind of fire that lasts, the kind that carries them through the long hours. Across the hall, the spinning has slowed. The woman sets the wool aside for now, flexing her fingers as if easing a quiet tension. She looks toward the fire, her expression calm and thoughtful, then pulls her cloak a little tighter around her shoulders. The young boy with the bone carving has paused as well. He turns the piece over in his hands, studying it from different angles. There is no frustration in his face, only quiet focus, as if he understands that the shape will come in time. Eirik watches him for a moment, then lowers his gaze again. Winter teaches a kind of patience that is not forced, but grown. There is no choice but to move slowly, to accept that things will take as long as they need. The pot near the fire releases another gentle cloud of steam. This time, someone lifts it carefully and shifts it slightly closer to the heat. The movement is small, but it matters. Everything is adjusted in small ways, guided by experience rather than urgency. A faint creaking sound comes from the roof above, as snow settles and shifts under its own weight. It is a soft, drawn-out sound, almost like a long breath. No one looks up. It is a familiar part of winter, something that comes and goes without warning. Eirik lets his head rest lightly against the wall behind him. The wood is cool, but not uncomfortable. He closes his eyes again, just for a moment, allowing the quiet to settle deeper around him. He does not fully sleep. Instead, he drifts. In this half-rest, the mind moves slowly, without clear direction. Thoughts come and go like distant shapes, never staying long enough to take form. The sounds of the hall blend together, becoming something soft and continuous. The crackle of the fire, the quiet movement of cloth, the faint shifting of bodies at rest. After a time, he opens his eyes again. The hall looks much the same, but a few people have changed positions. Someone who was resting now sits near the fire. Another who was awake has drifted into sleep. The pattern continues, always shifting, always gentle. Eirik notices the older man again, now leaning slightly forward, his gaze fixed on the flames. There is a calm depth in his expression, as if he is not just watching the fire, but remembering something within it. No words are spoken. They are not needed. Near the entrance, a small draft of air slips through a narrow gap, carrying a faint chill. It moves across the floor slowly, touching the edges of the furs and the wooden boards beneath. It does not last long. The warmth of the hall soon softens it. Still, it is a reminder. Outside, the winter continues. unchanged. Eric draws his cloak closer again, feeling the balance between warmth and cold, between inside and outside, between stillness and movement. He shifts his attention toward a small pile of tools nearby. One of them, a simple blade, catches the light in a soft, dull way. It has been used many times, its edge worn but still useful. He reaches for it, not to use it immediately, but to check it. His fingers move along the surface, feeling for roughness, for places where the metal might need care. These quiet checks are part of the season. Nothing is left to chance. If something breaks in winter, it cannot always be replaced. He sets the blade back down gently. Across the hall, a soft voice begins again. Not a story this time, but something closer to a quiet memory. The words are slow, spaced out, as if each one is chosen carefully. Eric listens without turning. The voice speaks of a past journey, of a time when the sea was open and the days were long, of light that stretched late into the evening, and of the sound of water against wood, as a boat moved steadily forward. The memory feels distant, almost unreal compared to the stillness of the present, and yet it brings a quiet warmth of its own. Eric breathes slowly, letting the words settle into the rhythm of the hall. Winter does not erase the past. It simply holds it at a distance. The fire shifts again, sending a soft glow across the room. The shadows move gently, stretching and folding along the walls. Eric lowers his gaze once more, his body settling deeper into rest. Around him, the quiet life of the hall continues, steady and unbroken, as the long winter night stretches onward, carrying each small moment with it in a calm and endless flow. The night continues in its slow and endless way, though it no longer feels like night in the way it once did. The difference between darkness and light has softened so much that it barely matters anymore. The world outside remains dim and distant, while inside the hall, the fire holds its quiet place at the center of everything. Eric opens his eyes again, though it feels as if he never fully closed them. His body has rested, but not deeply. This kind of rest is enough. It has to be. The fire has changed once more. The flames are lower now, but the coals beneath them glow with a deep, steady heat. Someone nearby leans forward and carefully adds another piece of wood, placing it with quiet precision so that it catches slowly rather than all at once. The light grows again, gently expanding across the room. Eric sits up, pulling his cloak closer around his shoulders. He rubs his hands together, feeling the slow return of warmth. His fingers are stiff, but they loosen gradually, responding to the heat of the fire. There is movement across the hall. Two figures rise and begin to prepare near the entrance. They move quietly, wrapping themselves in thicker layers, adjusting their boots, checking their gloves. Their actions are slow, deliberate, and without conversation. Eric watches them for a moment. It is not common to leave the hall during these long winter nights, but sometimes it must be done. Small tasks still exist outside. Animals may need checking. Snow may need to be cleared from certain paths. The world does not fully stop, even in the deepest winter. One of the figures opens the door slightly. A narrow line of pale light slips inside, along with a breath of cold air. It moves quickly across the floor, touching the edges of the fire's warmth before fading. The two figures step out, closing the door carefully behind them. For a moment, the hall feels different, not emptier, but quieter in a new way. Eric listens as the faint sound of their footsteps fades into the snow outside. He imagines the world beyond the door, the ground covered in deep, untouched white, the sky stretched wide and dim, the air still and heavy with cold. There is a kind of calm in that image, but also a quiet weight. He turns his attention back to the fire. Near him, the older man has shifted again, now resting back against the wall, his eyes half closed. His breathing is slow, steady, as if he is moving between sleep and wakefulness without fully choosing either. Across the room, the young boy continues with his carving. His movements are more confident now, though still careful. Small pieces of bone fall away with each motion, collecting in a light scatter near his feet. Eric notices this change. It is small, but it is there. Time moves even here. The woman who had been spinning earlier now folds the prepared wool, setting it aside neatly. She adjusts the pile with quiet care, ensuring it stays clean and dry. These small details matter. Everything must be preserved as well as possible. The pot is stirred again, though no one seems eager to eat. Hunger remains steady but not urgent. It waits quietly, just like everything else. Eric leans forward, extending his hands toward the fire once more. The warmth is steady, familiar, something that does not change as quickly as the air or the light. He watches the flames carefully. There is a pattern to them, though it is never the same twice. They rise, fold, shift, and fade, always moving, always changing, but always returning to the same quiet purpose. The door opens again. The two figures return, brushing snow from their shoulders as they step inside. Their movements are calm, but there is a slight tension in the way they carry themselves, a quiet alertness that comes from being outside in the cold. One of them speaks softly, just a few words. The snow is deeper now. The wind may return. The words are simple, but they carry meaning. Eric listens without reacting. There is no need for concern yet. Winter always changes in small ways, sometimes in larger ones. It is something to be aware of, not something to fear. The door is closed again, sealing the warmth back inside. The two who returned move toward the fire, extending their hands, letting the cold leave them slowly. Their breath is visible for a moment, then fades as the warmth settles in. Eric watches them quietly. There is a shared understanding in these moments. No one speaks of hardship directly, but it is always present, always known. And yet there is no panic, only patience. The hall adjusts once more, returning to its steady rhythm. The fire crackles softly. The pot simmers. The quiet voices rise and fall again. Eric shifts slightly, feeling the pull of rest returning once more. It is not a deep sleep that comes, but a gentle drifting, a soft closing of the eyes that allows the body to settle. He lowers himself back onto the furs, drawing them close. The sounds of the hall continue around him, steady and calm. The world outside remains distant, covered in snow and silence. And within the warmth of the longhouse, surrounded by quiet movement and the soft glow of the fire, Eric lets himself drift again, carried gently by the endless flow of the long winter night. The quiet drifting of rest holds Eric for a time, though it is never deep enough to carry him far. He wakes again slowly, as if rising through layers of warmth and soft sound. The fire still burns, though its shape has changed once more, settling into a calm and steady glow that fills the hall with gentle light. The air feels slightly thicker now, touched by the lingering warmth of many bodies and the slow breath of the fire. It is not uncomfortable, only different. Everything here changes in small ways, barely noticeable unless one pays close attention. Eric remains still for a moment, listening. The wind outside has returned, though not strongly. It brushes lightly against the walls, moving with a slow, steady rhythm. The sound is soft, almost like distant water, flowing across the land without hurry. He shifts slightly beneath the firs, then sits up again. Around him, the hall continues its quiet life. A few more people are awake now, though none of them speak loudly. Movements are careful, as if shaped by the stillness itself. One of the men who had gone outside earlier now sits near the fire, his hands extended toward the warmth. His face is calm, but there is a faint redness on his skin, a quiet mark left by the cold air. Eric watches him for a moment, then glances toward the door. It remains closed, steady, holding back the weight of the outside world. Near the fire, the pot is lifted once more. This time, the food is shared again. Bowls pass slowly from hand to hand, each person taking a small portion, enough to warm the body, enough to continue. Eric receives his share and holds it close, letting the heat settle into his fingers before taking a slow bite. The taste is familiar, simple, steady. There is comfort in its sameness. He eats without speaking, listening instead to the quiet sounds around him, the low voices, the shifting of cloth, the soft crackle of wood as it settles into flame. After a few moments, someone begins to speak again. This time, the voice is younger, softer, and carries a different kind of tone. Not a story, not quite a memory, but something in between. The words move gently, describing small things. The way frost forms along the edges of wood. The way the sky looks just before the faint light returns. The sound of footsteps in fresh snow. Eric listens closely. These details are not important in a larger sense, but here they matter. They fill the space. They give shape to the long hours. The voice continues for a while, then fades naturally without any clear ending. No one responds immediately. The silence that follows is not empty. It simply allows the words to settle. Eric finishes his meal and sets the bowl aside. He leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands held loosely together. The warmth from the fire reaches him again, easing the quiet tension in his body. Across the hall, the young boy has set his carving aside, and now watches the flames, much like he did before. His eyes move slowly, following the shifting shapes, as if the fire itself holds something to be understood. Eric recognizes that look. There are times when the fire becomes more than just warmth. It becomes something to watch, something that fills the mind without effort. The woman who had been spinning earlier now adjusts the bundles of wool once more, ensuring they remain safe from the dampness that can slowly gather in the air. She works with quiet care, checking each piece, then covering them lightly. These small acts of attention are constant. Nothing is left without care. The wind outside grows slightly stronger for a moment, pressing gently against the walls. The wood responds with a faint creak, a low, steady sound that passes through the structure of the hall. Eric lifts his gaze toward the roof, listening. The sound fades again, leaving only the quiet interior behind. The man near the fire shifts slightly, pulling his cloak closer. He glances toward Eric briefly, then returns his gaze to the flames. No words pass between them, but the moment is shared. Time continues to move, though it feels unchanged. The fire is fed again, carefully, slowly. The pot is adjusted. The furs are shifted. The small rhythms continue. Eric leans back once more, letting his body settle against the wall. His eyes grow heavier again, though not from exhaustion. It is the quiet, the steady sameness, the gentle weight of the long winter night that draws him toward rest. He allows his eyes to close. The sounds of the hall soften, blending into a single, steady presence. The fire continues to burn. The wind moves softly outside, and within the warmth of the longhouse, surrounded by quiet life and gentle motion, Eric drifts once more into that calm space between waking and sleep, carried slowly by the endless stretch of winter. The quiet continues, deep and unbroken, like a long breath that never fully ends. Eric rests within it, his body still, his thoughts moving slowly and without direction. When his eyes open again, it feels as though only a small moment has passed, though it could have been much longer. The fire has shifted once more. The flames are softer now, lower, but the coals beneath them glow with a deep, steady warmth. Their light spreads gently across the floor, touching the edges of furs, the legs of benches, the quiet forms of those resting nearby. Eric lifts his head slightly, taking in the familiar scene. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has moved forward. A few people remain awake, others sleep, their breathing slow and even. The hall carries both states at once, without separation, without any clear boundary between them. He sits up slowly, adjusting his cloak. The air feels a little cooler again, though the warmth of the fire still holds strong at the center. Near the fire, someone carefully stirs the coals, shifting them just enough to keep the heat steady. No flames leap upward. There is no need for brightness now, only for warmth that lasts. Eric watches the movement of the embers. They glow, fade, and glow again, like a quiet pulse. Across the hall, the older man has begun to speak once more. His voice is low, almost blending into the sound of the fire itself. It is not a full story this time, but a string of small thoughts, spoken gently, without urgency. He speaks of the way snow gathers differently depending on the shape of the land, of how some winters feel heavier, not because of the cold, but because of the length of the darkness, of how, sometimes, the quiet itself becomes something to notice. Eric listens. There is no need to respond. The words are not meant to start conversation. They are simply shared, allowed to exist for a while before fading. Near the entrance, a faint draft moves along the floor again. It is soft, barely noticeable, but it carries a slight sharpness, a reminder of the cold that waits just beyond the walls. Someone nearby adjusts their position, pulling their furs tighter. Eric shifts as well, drawing his cloak closer around him. The balance between warmth and cold is always present. It moves gently, like everything else, never fully settling in one place. The pot over the fire is quieter now. Its contents have thickened slightly, and the steam rises more slowly. No one reaches for it at this moment. Hunger comes and goes, and now it rests. Eric lowers his gaze to his hands. They are still, resting lightly against his knees. There is no task waiting for them right now. This, too, is part of winter. There are moments when nothing needs to be done. Moments where simply being present is enough. The young boy has fallen asleep, his small carving resting beside him. His breathing is soft, steady, his body wrapped in layers of warmth. The woman who had been working with wool now sits quietly, her hands resting in her lap. Her eyes are open, but her focus is distant, as if she is watching something far beyond the walls of the hall. Eric notices these small details, not with intention, but simply because there is little else to draw the eye. Time stretches gently. The wind outside rises again, brushing against the hall with a soft, continuous sound. It does not push hard. It does not demand attention. It simply moves, steady and patient. The roof creaks faintly in response. Eric tilts his head slightly, listening. There is no concern in him, only awareness. These sounds are part of the season. They come and go, just like the light, just like the quiet. The older man's voice fades again, leaving the hall in near silence once more. Only the fire remains. Its steady crackle fills the space, soft and comforting. Eric leans back slowly, resting against the wall again. His eyes grow heavy, but he does not close them just yet. Instead, he watches the fire, the way the coals shift, the way small flames appear, then disappear, the way the light moves gently across the room. There is something endless in it, something that asks nothing, something that continues without effort. Around him, the hall settles deeper into stillness. The sleepers remain still. The awake grow quieter. The space itself seems to soften. Eric lets out a slow breath. His body relaxes further, the last small tension leaving his shoulders. He closes his eyes again, allowing the quiet to carry him. The fire continues to glow. The wind moves softly outside. And within the longhouse, surrounded by warmth and the steady presence of others, Eric drifts once more into rest as the long winter night stretches on without end. The quiet deepens in a way that feels almost complete, as if the longhouse itself has settled into a slower breath. Eric rests within that stillness, his eyes closed, his body warm beneath the layers of fur. The fire continues its steady glow, not bright, not dim, but balanced in a way that holds the space together. Time passes again, though it does not announce itself. When Eric opens his eyes, the light in the hall feels slightly different. It is subtle, almost impossible to measure, but something has shifted. The glow of the fire seems softer, the shadows longer, stretching across the wooden floor in quiet shapes. He does not move at first. Instead, he listens. The wind outside has softened once more. It is now only a faint presence, brushing lightly against the walls. The hall itself is nearly silent, save for the slow, steady breathing of those resting and the gentle crackle of embers. Eric sits up slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet around him. His movements are practiced, shaped by many nights like this, where even small sounds carry further than expected. He draws his cloak closer, feeling the familiar weight of it settle across his shoulders. Near the fire, only one person remains fully awake. An older woman sits with her hands extended toward the warmth, her posture relaxed but attentive. She watches the coals closely, adding a small piece of wood when needed, keeping the balance just right. Eric notices the care in her movements. The fire is never left unattended. Not for long. He shifts slightly closer, extending his own hands toward the warmth. The heat reaches him slowly, easing into his fingers, softening the lingering cold. There is a comfort in this simple act. The warmth, the stillness, the quiet presence of another person who understands the same rhythm. For a while, neither of them speaks. Words are not needed. The hall holds enough. After some time, the older woman glances toward him briefly, then back to the fire. It is a small acknowledgement, nothing more, but it carries a sense of shared awareness. Eric nods slightly, almost without thinking. The fire shifts again, a small log settling deeper into the coals. A few sparks rise gently, fading before they reach the roof. The smoke drifts upward in a slow, steady stream, disappearing through the opening above. Eric follows it with his eyes for a moment. Then he lowers his gaze again. Across the hall, the others remain still. The young boy sleeps deeply now, his carving forgotten beside him. The woman who had been working with wool has also drifted into rest, her hands still folded gently in her lap. The hall feels fuller in sleep, not empty, but held together by the quiet presence of many people at rest. Eric breathes slowly, letting the rhythm of the space settle into him once more. There is no need to move, no task waiting, no place to go. This is the heart of the long winter night, a time where doing less becomes its own kind of work. After a while, he reaches toward the small pile of wood beside the fire and selects a thin piece. He places it carefully onto the coals, watching as it begins to catch, slowly, without force. The flame rises just a little, enough to keep the warmth steady. The older woman adjusts her position slightly, pulling her cloak closer. She leans forward, resting her hands near the fire, her eyes half closed, as if she too is moving between wakefulness and rest. Eric watches her for a moment, then lets his gaze drift again. The roof above creaks softly, not from wind this time, but from the slow settling of snow. It shifts its weight, pressing gently against the structure, reminding those inside of the quiet burden carried above them. Eric listens. There is no concern, only recognition. This is part of winter. Everything carries weight. Everything moves slowly. Near the entrance, a faint line of pale light begins to show along the edge of the door. It is not strong. It is not bright, but it is there. Eric notices it. A quiet change, the return of something that has been gone for a long time. The faintest hint of day. He does not rise to look. He does not move toward it. Instead, he remains where he is, letting the presence of that light settle into the space naturally. The hall does not react. No one rushes. No one speaks of it. The change is understood without words. Time is moving forward again. Outside, the sky is beginning to shift, though only slightly. The darkness softens at its edges, giving way to a pale, distant glow that spreads slowly across the frozen land. Inside, the fire continues to burn. Eric feels the quiet weight of the moment. The long night is not over, but it is changing. He leans back slightly, resting once more against the wall. His eyes grow heavy again, though this time there is a different feeling beneath it. Not just rest, but a quiet awareness of the passing of time. The world beyond the hall is beginning to return. Slowly, gently, and within the warmth of the longhouse, surrounded by the steady breath of winter life, Eric closes his eyes once more as the faint light of a distant morning begins to touch the edge of the long night. The faint light beyond the door lingers quietly, never fully entering, only resting at the edge of the world outside. It does not rush forward. It does not brighten the hall. Instead, it waits, as if unsure whether it should return at all. Eric remains where he is, his eyes closed for a while longer, though he is no longer fully resting. The presence of that distant light has shifted something within him, something small and difficult to name. When he opens his eyes again, the hall feels slightly more awake, not in movement, not in sound, but in awareness. The fire has been tended once more. Its glow is steadier now, with a few low flames rising above the coals. The warmth feels more even, spreading across the space in a soft, constant way. The older woman still sits nearby, though her posture has changed. She is more upright now, her eyes open, watching the fire with quiet attention. Her hands move slowly as she adjusts a small piece of wood, placing it carefully where it will burn the longest. Eric shifts forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. He glances toward the door again. The pale line of light is still there, perhaps a little stronger now, though it is difficult to be sure. It does not reach far inside, but its presence is enough. Across the hall, a few others begin to stir. One man lifts his head, blinking slowly, his gaze unfocused for a moment before settling on the fire. Another adjusts his blanket, turning onto his side, then slowly sitting up. There is no sudden waking here, only a gradual return. Eric watches as the young boy stirs as well, his small hands moving slightly as he wakes. He sits up slowly, looking around the hall with quiet curiosity, as if rediscovering the space each time he opens his eyes. The carving lies beside him, untouched. Waiting near the far wall, someone begins to move toward the storage area again. The door opens softly, revealing the dim space beyond. The person steps inside, checking supplies once more, counting quietly, ensuring everything remains as it should be. This is done often, not out of worry, but out of habit. Winter leaves little room for uncertainty. Eric breathes slowly, taking in the faint changes around him. The hall feels different now. Not warmer, not brighter, but more aware. The long stretch of darkness is beginning to loosen its hold, even if only slightly. The pot is lifted again, and this time more people gather near the fire. Bowls are passed quietly, hands moving with familiar ease. The food is the same, simple and steady, but there is a subtle shift in how it is received. There is a little more movement now, a little more presence. Eric accepts his portion, holding it close as he always does. The warmth seeps into his hands, grounding him in the moment. He takes a slow bite, letting the simple taste settle. Across from him, the older man is awake again. He sits with his back against the wall, his gaze steady, watching the small changes in the hall as if noting them quietly. After a while, he speaks. His voice is soft, but clearer than before. He does not tell a story this time. He speaks of light, of how it returns slowly during this season, of how, at first, it is barely noticeable, just a faint change along the edge of the sky. But each day it grows, not quickly, not suddenly, but steadily. Eric listens closely. There is a quiet comfort in these words, the idea that something is returning, even if it cannot yet be fully seen. The others listen as well, though no one interrupts. The fire crackles gently. The wind outside has softened again, and the faint light at the door remains. Eric finishes his meal and sets the bowl aside. He leans back slightly, feeling the warmth settle into him once more. His eyes move toward the roof, following the slow rise of smoke as it drifts upward and disappears. Everything continues as it has, and yet something is changing. The long winter night is not ending all at once. It is slowly loosening, gently shifting. Eric feels it, not as a thought, but as a quiet sense within him. He lowers his gaze again, watching the fire. The flames move softly. The coals glow steadily. The warmth holds. Around him, the hall continues its quiet life, but with a subtle difference, a faint sense of movement beneath the stillness. Eric draws his cloak closer and allows himself to rest once more, not fully sleeping, but settling into the gentle rhythm as the first quiet signs of returning light begin to touch the world. Beyond the longhouse, the faint return of light lingers beyond the door, never rushing, never demanding attention. It rests there quietly, as if it understands the slow rhythm of winter and chooses not to disturb it. Inside the hall, that subtle change continues to spread, not through brightness, but through a gentle shift in awareness. Eric remains seated near the fire, his body relaxed, his hands resting loosely in his lap. He is not tired in the same way as before. The heaviness of endless darkness has softened, replaced by something lighter, though still calm and slow. The fire burns steadily. It has been carefully maintained, never allowed to fade too far, never allowed to grow too strong. Its warmth is even, surrounding those closest to it and reaching outward in quiet waves. Eric watches as one of the men near the fire adjusts a piece of wood, placing it carefully so it catches at the edges. The flames respond slowly, rising just enough to keep the warmth balanced. There is no rush in any movement. Across the hall, more people are awake now, not all at once, not suddenly, but one by one. A woman stretches her arms gently, her movements slow and quiet. Another person sits upright, rubbing their eyes before pulling their cloak closer. The young boy shifts again, reaching for his carving, though he does not begin working on it yet. He simply holds it, turning it in his hands as if remembering what it is. Eric notices these small changes. They are simple, but they matter. The hall feels fuller now, not because there are more people, but because more of them are awake at the same time. A soft murmur of voices begins to return, still low, still calm, but present. Near the door, someone stands and moves closer, placing a hand against the wood. They pause there, feeling the cold that presses from the other side, sensing the quiet change in the world beyond. Then, slowly, they open it just a little. The pale light slips in again. This time, it reaches slightly further across the floor, touching the edge of the fire's glow. The air that follows is cold, but not harsh. It carries a clean stillness, a quiet freshness that contrasts with the warmth inside. Eric turns his head slightly, watching. The outside world is still covered in snow, still silent, still heavy with winter. But the sky has changed. It is no longer as dark. There is a soft grayness now, spreading slowly, almost gently, across the horizon. The door is closed again, sealing the warmth back inside. But the image remains. Eric feels it settle in his mind, a reminder that the world continues beyond these walls. The pot is lifted again, and this time more people gather. Food is shared. Bowls pass from hand to hand. There is a little more movement now, a little more presence in each action. Eric takes his portion and eats slowly, as always. The taste has not changed, but the moment feels slightly different. Across from him, two people speak quietly, their voices blending into the soft background of the hall. They speak of small things, of how the snow looked outside, of how the air felt, of how the light seemed a little stronger. These are not big observations, but they are noticed. The older man listens, his gaze steady, then nods slightly, as if confirming what is already understood. Eric finishes his meal and sets the bowl aside. He leans forward slightly, extending his hands toward the fire again. The warmth is steady, comforting, familiar. The fire remains the center. It does not change, even as everything else begins to shift. Near the far wall, the bundles of wool are checked again, adjusted slightly, protected from any dampness that might gather. The care is constant, quiet, and precise. The young boy begins carving again, his movements more confident than before. The small piece of bone takes shape slowly beneath his hands. Eric watches him for a moment, then looks away. Time is moving forward, even here. The wind outside has softened again. The hall is filled with a gentle balance of sound and silence. Voices rise, then fall. The fire crackles softly. The faint presence of light lingers beyond the door. Eric shifts slightly, resting back against the wall. His body feels lighter, not because anything has changed in a large way, but because something has begun. The long winter night is still here, but it is no longer endless. He closes his eyes again, not from tiredness, but from a quiet sense of rest. Around him, the hall continues its steady rhythm. People move, speak softly, work in small ways, and settle again. The fire holds its place, the warmth remains, and beyond the walls, the pale light of a slow and distant morning continues to grow, almost unnoticed, as Eirik rests within the calm and gentle flow of the changing winter. The pale light beyond the door continues its slow return. Though it never fully enters the hall, it lingers at the edges, soft and distant, as if respecting the quiet world within. Inside, the rhythm of life has shifted once more, almost too gently to notice unless one sits in stillness long enough. Eirik opens his eyes again, not from sleep, but from a quiet awareness that has settled into him. His body feels rested in a different way now, less heavy, less pulled down by the endless dark that filled the earlier hours. The fire is stronger again. Someone has added a thicker piece of wood, and the flames rise a little higher, casting longer shapes across the hall. The light moves slowly along the walls, touching the carved beams, the tools, the folded wool, the still forms of those who continue to rest. Eirik sits forward slightly, extending his hands toward the warmth. The heat reaches him quickly, more alive now, carrying a steady energy that feels different from the quiet embers of before. Around him, more people are awake, not all, but enough that the hall feels gently alive again. Voices are present, though still soft. Movements are more frequent. Someone walks slowly from one side of the hall to the other, adjusting a stack of supplies. Another kneels near the fire, checking the pot, stirring it slowly, ensuring it does not settle too thickly. Eirik watches these small actions. They are the same as before, and yet they feel different. The return of light, even faint, changes how everything is held. Near the door, the same faint glow remains, but it has grown slightly stronger. It reaches just a little further across the wooden floor now, touching the edge of a fir, the base of a bench. Eirik notices it without turning his head fully. It is enough to feel it. The young boy continues his carving, his hands more certain now. Small pieces fall away with quiet precision, the shape becoming clearer with each movement. He pauses sometimes, holding the object up to the light, studying it, then continues again. The older man sits upright now, fully awake. His gaze moves slowly across the hall, observing everything with calm attention. He does not speak for a while, allowing the sounds around him to fill the space. Then, after some time, he begins again. His voice is steady, low, even. He speaks of winters from long ago, not with great detail, not with strong emotion, but in a way that feels like remembering something familiar. He speaks of nights when the darkness felt heavier, of times when the snow did not fall for many days, leaving the land hard and still, of the way people waited, not just for warmth, but for light. Eirik listens closely. These words settle differently now. Before, they would have blended into the endless stretch of night. Now they carry a quiet sense of distance, as if those heavier nights belong more to memory than to the present moment. The fire shifts again, one of the logs cracking softly as it settles. A brief sound, then quiet again. The pot is lifted and more food is shared. This time there is slightly more movement, more awareness in the passing of bowls. Hands reach, receive, return. Eirik takes his portion and holds it for a moment, feeling the warmth seep into his fingers. He eats slowly. The taste remains the same, but the moment feels fuller. Across from him, two people speak quietly, their voices blending into the soft background of the hall. They speak of the outside again, of how the sky looked, of how the light seemed to stay a little longer this time. These are small observations, but they carry weight. Eirik finishes his meal and sets the bowl aside. He leans back slightly, resting against the wall, his gaze drifting once more toward the faint light near the door. It remains steady, quiet, present. The wind outside has nearly faded. Only the soft settling of snow can be heard now. A faint, distant sound that moves gently across the land. Inside, the warmth holds. The fire continues to burn with quiet strength. People move in small, steady ways. Some begin simple tasks again, checking tools, folding cloth, adjusting supplies. Winter is not over, but something has begun to change. Eirik feels it not as a thought, but as a quiet easing within him. The long night no longer feels endless. It feels like something that is passing, slowly, gently. He closes his eyes again, not fully sleeping, but resting within that change. Around him, the hall carries on. The fire glows. The voices soften. The faint light remains at the edge. And within the steady warmth of the longhouse, Eirik rests as the long winter night begins. At last, to loosen its quiet hold. The quiet shift continues, so gentle that it feels almost like a memory rather than a present moment. The pale light beyond the door has grown again, not enough to fill the hall, but enough to be noticed without effort. It rests softly along the floor, brushing against the edges of the room as if testing its return. Eric opens his eyes once more. This time, the change is clearer. The darkness inside the hall no longer feels as deep. The fire still provides most of the light, but it no longer stands alone. There is something else now, something faint but steady, joining it from beyond the walls. He sits up slowly, drawing his cloak closer around him. The air feels lighter, not warmer, not softer, but different in a way that is difficult to hold in words. Around him, more people are awake than before. The hall is no longer divided between sleepers and those who keep watch. Instead, there is a quiet sense of shared presence. Movements are still slow, voices still low, but there is more of them now. A gentle increase in life within the space. Near the fire, someone adds another piece of wood, slightly larger than before. The flames respond, rising a little higher, their light stretching further across the hall. The combination of firelight and the faint glow from outside creates a softer balance. Shadows are less heavy. Edges are easier to see. Eric watches this without speaking. Across the room, the young boy holds up his carving again, turning it slowly in the growing light. The shape is clearer now, more defined. He studies it quietly, then makes a few small adjustments with careful hands. The older man sits nearby observing. After a moment, he gives a small nod. Nothing more. No words are needed. The woman who had been tending the wool begins her work again. But this time, her movements carry a slight change. They are still calm, still steady, but there is a quiet alertness in them, as if she is more present in each motion. Others begin to move as well. A man stands and stretches slowly, rolling his shoulders, easing the stiffness that has settled over many hours of stillness. Another walks toward the entrance, pausing there, looking at the faint light that rests against the door. After a moment, he opens it slightly. This time, the light enters more fully. It is still soft, still pale, but it reaches further into the hall, touching the wooden floor, the edges of the fire, the lower parts of the walls. The cold air follows, but it feels different now. Not as sharp, not as heavy. It carries a quiet freshness, something that feels almost like the beginning of change. Eric turns his head slightly, watching. Outside, the sky is no longer dark. It is a soft gray, stretching across the horizon, spreading slowly, gently. The snow reflects that light, giving the land a faint glow that feels calm and endless. The door is closed again, but the feeling remains. Inside, the hall adjusts. People shift slightly closer to the light, not in any deliberate way, but naturally. The fire continues to burn steadily, but now it shares its role. The space feels more open, more awake. The pot is lifted again, and food is shared once more. Eric takes his portion, holding it close as always, but this time he notices the light reflecting softly off the surface of the broth. It is a small detail, but it is new. He eats slowly, listening as the voices around him grow slightly more present. There is still no loudness, no urgency, but there is more awareness in the way people speak, more connection in the way they listen. The older man speaks again, his voice steady. He speaks not of the past this time, but of what comes next, of the slow return of longer days, of the work that will begin again, little by little, of the way the land will change, not all at once, but in small, steady steps. Eric listens carefully. These words do not feel distant. They feel closer now, more real. The fire shifts again, its flames steady, its warmth constant. The light beyond the door remains. The wind is quiet. The snow is still. Eric finishes his meal and sets the bowl aside. He leans back once more, resting against the wall, but his posture is different now, less heavy, more at ease. He looks toward the faint light again, letting it settle into him. The long winter night is still present, but it is no longer endless. It is something that is passing, slowly, gently, and within the quiet warmth of the longhouse, surrounded by steady life and soft returning light, Eric rests as the world begins, almost silently, to move toward something new. The soft, gray light continues to grow beyond the door, not in sudden brightness, but in a quiet, steady way that feels almost like breathing. It reaches further now, stretching gently across the snow outside, reflecting back toward the longhouse in a pale and calming glow. Inside, the hall holds both worlds at once, the warmth of the fire and the quiet return of light. Eric sits still for a long moment, watching how the two meet. The fire no longer carries the space alone. Its glow blends softly with the faint daylight, creating a calm balance that feels new, yet familiar in a distant way. He shifts slightly, adjusting the fur around his shoulders, and lets out a slow breath. The air feels clearer, lighter, as if something that had been pressing quietly over everything has begun to lift. Around him, the hall is more awake now than it has been in many hours. Not fully busy, not loud, but gently active. People move with a quiet purpose. Someone checks the tools again, but this time with a different kind of attention, as if preparing rather than simply maintaining. Another person walks toward the storage area, opening the door and looking inside, counting, adjusting, but also considering what may be needed soon. The rhythm has changed, not completely, but enough to be felt. Eric watches as the young boy stands and takes a few steps toward the light near the door. He does not open it, only stands close, looking at the faint brightness that seeps through the edges. The carving is still in his hand. He holds it up slightly, letting the soft light touch it. The shape is clearer now, more defined. The boy turns it slowly, then lowers it again, satisfied in a quiet way. The older man observes this, his expression calm, his gaze steady. After a moment, he speaks. His voice is low, but there is a gentle strength in it now. He speaks of the turning of seasons, of how winter always feels endless while it is happening, and how, slowly, almost without notice, it begins to change. He speaks of patience, of waiting not as something difficult, but as something natural. Eric listens. The words settle easily. They do not feel heavy. They feel true. Near the fire, the pot is lifted once more. Food is shared again, but this time there is a quiet sense of readiness in the way it is passed. Hands move a little more quickly, though still without rush. The warmth of the meal feels different, not just sustaining, but preparing. Eric takes his portion and holds it for a moment. The light now reflects clearly on the surface. He notices this, a small detail, but one that feels important. He eats slowly, as he always has, but his attention shifts between the fire and the growing light. Both are present. Both matter. Across the hall, someone moves toward the door again. This time, it opens a little wider. The light enters more fully. Still soft, still pale, but enough to reach across the floor and touch the center of the hall. The cold air follows, but it no longer feels sharp or heavy. It feels clean, fresh. Eric turns his head slightly, looking toward the open space. Outside, the land stretches quietly beneath its blanket of snow. The sky is a soft gray, wide and calm. The world is still, but it is no longer hidden. The door remains open for a few moments longer than before. Then it is closed gently. The warmth returns fully, but now it holds the memory of the outside within it. The hall feels different, not just because of the light, but because of what it brings. A sense of movement, a sense of time continuing. Eric sets his empty bowl aside and leans forward, placing his hands near the fire one more time. The warmth feels familiar, grounding. He looks at the flames, watching them rise and fold as they always have. They have not changed. They have carried him through the long night, through the stillness, through the waiting. Now they remain, but they are no longer the only source of light. Eric sits back slowly, resting against the wall. His body feels steady, calm, awake in a quiet way. Around him, people begin to move more, not quickly, not urgently, but with a gentle sense of beginning. Someone gathers a few tools. Another folds furs neatly. The bundles of wool are checked again, this time with the thought of future use rather than simple care. The young boy returns to his place, setting his carving beside him, though his attention drifts often toward the door. The older man rests quietly, his eyes half closed, listening more than speaking now. Eric lets his gaze move slowly across the hall. Everything is the same, and yet everything is changing. The long winter night has not ended all at once. It has softened, shifted, opened. He breathes in slowly, filling his lungs with the warm, steady air of the hall. Then he lets it out, long and calm. The fire continues to burn. The light continues to grow beyond the door. The wind remains quiet. And within the longhouse, surrounded by warmth, quiet voices, and the gentle return of day, Eric sits in stillness as the long, winter night finally gives way to the slow and peaceful beginning of something new.